When you don't know how a recruit's really doing until week 10, that's a problem. TrackWired's field training management software replaces old school paperwork with a clean, automated system. Streamlined reporting, knowledge comprehension, and crystal clear performance trends, all handled in one secure place. TrackWire gives you real time insight into their field training process so supervisors get real time visibility. FTOs save hours and recruits stay on track. If you want to tighten up your FTO program, start by going to trackwire.com. That's TRACwire.com. We talk a lot about fixing what's broken in this job, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do as a leader is just to see what's already going on right. Know Your Force is a simple system that sends a quick text survey to the people you interact with. It's helping leaders see the good their teams are already doing, back their people with real data, and step in before stress turns into burnout. Learn more at knowyourforce.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to be talking about arguably the most critical role in all of policing. And it's not just me saying it. It's not going to be my guest who's nodding his head on the other end of the screen. But this is frequently said by people that have this role or don't have this role. It's said by people that are brand new to the job. It's said by people that are seasoned, high-ranking, retired. And that is the field training officer or the patrol training officer. So FTO, PTO for those two models there. But without further, Brian Willard, Brian, active cop from Oregon and FTO. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long have you been in FTO?
I've been in FTO going on, well, let's see, I started my career right around the same time you did, back in 2007.
Yeah.
And I've been in FTO going on 16 years now. So 19 years on the job, 16 years training new police officers and being a part of that process.
Yeah, that's legit, man. And we've had a lot of really good conversations off recording about the job, about what police need, and we came to this decision to talk about FTO, and it'll become more relevant, all the ins and outs and why we have the perspectives we do as we go, but it's so relevant to everyone. And before we get into the meat and potatoes, man, that's a long time to be an FTO. So, I mean, before we started recording, you're talking about how you've had that stretch, and we all know that stretch, right? When you just get recruit or student after student, and sometimes it's because no one else is available. Sometimes it's because you're the whisperer or whatnot. But yeah, let's talk about that. That's a long time. So good for you.
It is a long time. It's one of those things, and it comes in waves, right? It's like we will have, at my agency, we're not a big agency. We're about 50-ish sworn. And so we have these kind of ebbs and flows of hiring within our agency. And we will go stretches of time where we have one or two recruits. And it seems like more recently, especially in the last 5 years or so, and this has kind of been a trend nationwide, we're just getting inundated with recruit after recruit after recruit, mostly because we have retirements that are happening. And again, at my agency, we kind of hire in these bulks of people. And so 20 years later down the road, you have some attrition, and then you have some people that are retiring and they're done with the career. And so we have to fill that. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where when it's on, and it can be a daunting task at times. It can be a stressful endeavor in times, but I've done a lot of things in law enforcement, and arguably one of the most rewarding things that I've done in this career is being involved in the training of new cops and new police officers within my agency. It's just been an honor and a blessing to be able to do that. It's cool.
Yeah, that's such a positive reflection. And despite the stress, and we'll get into it, we'll get into some of our pet peeves of student officers or just the FTO dynamics. But yeah, it's hard to argue with the power of mentorship, right? And I think a lot of people that reflect on their career after 30 years or whatnot, it's usually roles like, I mean, it's one of two things. It's usually like the exciting stuff, maybe SWAT, tactic team, like the jump out kind of units, canine, or it's the complete other side where it's not about the fun things you did, but it's about passing on the next generation's knowledge, right? And setting them up right. So it's that legacy, because I think when we look back, we know, or when we're in it, we need to remember it's not all about us. We can't do this forever. We don't want to do this forever. At some point, someone's got to pick up the torch and keep going. And that is where you see people really love and reflect positively on their academy instructor time, their FTO time. They're being a newer street sergeant with some really young squads. Usually that's the one that kind of jumps out at people because they're like, man, it's just a bunch of baby cops running around, but in such a cool, exciting way because that passion is there, and then you feed off of that.
Yeah, and and you bring up an excellent point. It is how do we as police officers, right? There was a generation that came before us. There's a generation that's going to come after us. Um, you know, while we're doing this job, I think it's incumbent upon us as police officers to set the stage for the next generation of police officers. And that's where the role of FTO, I think, really comes into play. And we can talk about that and kind of what are the what are the things about an FTO? What does an FTO contribute? Why should people be an FTO? But I think sometimes we lose focus on the fact that there is a generation who set us up to be successful, and they've done their time. It's now our responsibility to do the same thing and to continue that legacy and continue the things that we respected of the guys that came before us. We should be setting that stage. We should be setting that example for the police officers that are going to come after us. And you talk about legacy. And I always find this interesting because, and I always talk about this with my recruits, it's like who I am as a police officer is a culmination of who my coaches were, who my
Mm-hmm.
FTOs were. I
Mm-hmm.
took little bits and pieces from those veterans who trained me how to do it, and I formulated my version of a police officer. And so we that's important to remember, right? It's almost, and I don't want to equate it to like raising teenagers because it's not that, but
It's a good metaphor, though. I mean, this
it's
comes up a lot: leadership and parenting. Because as a parent, and you know the drill, but you are a leader. You're a leader. You and the two parents, or even in that model, are the leaders of their family unit.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you get the feeling as a parent, and sometimes I get the feeling as an FTO, like, are they really listening to me? But at the end of the day, when your kids and the officers that become officers once they're done with the field training, they start showing traits of and doing things in a way that you taught them. Man, what a cool thing! What a cool thing to be able to kind of watch that and be a part of that. Passing on that legacy of what a good law enforcement officer should be.
Yeah, and my head went a totally different way, and I don't want to stay there because we'll come back to, what makes a great FTO. And you're talking about an example setting and modeling. And where my head started to go is I haven't socialized this, I don't think, but man, your FTO is such a recruiter for the industry. We talk about recruitment and staffing shortages and issues continually. It's been a ride, a grind for the last several years. But if your FTOs are doing the job with, I'm not talking about toxic positivity and fluffy stuff, but like real talk, like you're doing the job the best you can and you're passing on the knowledge the best you can, then man, what is that spreading? It's spreading all these cops around you because oftentimes FTOs are extremely successful leaders, line leaders, informal leaders, and everyone that they teach, everyone that they interact with, their student officers, their quote unquote boots, are like, man, this job isn't so bad because I got people that do it with this, this conviction, with these values. I want to be like these guys and gals training me. And so they're out in the community saying like, no, it's not what the media says. Like, I do important stuff and I feel like I am invested in and I feel like I'm making a difference.
You said something at the beginning of that where, you know, your FTOs have to be the recruiter for your agency. And I think there's no other statement out there that is more true than that. Your FTOs have to be a champion for your agency. They have to love the job. They have to be inspired about the job. They have to show interest in leadership, because really that's you're a first line leader to these new police officers. One of the I always go back to my field training at my agency, and I had an FTO within my agency that every time we got into the car, his mentality was, and he was a 20-year cop at this time. You know, his mentality was, this is the greatest job ever. It's the funnest job that we do. We're going to make mistakes, and that's fine. We learn from it. We own it. But let's just go out and have fun. And that was a guy who absolutely, even 20 years into his career, absolutely was a champion for this job and a champion for that agency. And those are the kinds of people that you want to be, let's just call it the first impression of your new police officers within an agency. You want those people that are going to champion the career. They're going to champion the agency. They're going to set the expectation of what the culture is at your agency and what law enforcement really should be. It's a job that is stressful at times, dangerous at times, but it's the only job that I can think of that you get to have such an impact on the community that you live in, the community that you work in, and you get to have fun from time to time doing it as well. So,
Yeah, it takes pause. And I'd be curious if you have reflection as to what has helped you stay positive focused, 16 years as a field trainer and, going on 20 years in the job. Because the monotony and the cyclical nature of the job can lead us to lose sight of that. But if we take a pause and we remove ourselves from that, we can recognize pretty easily, man, we do a lot of really cool stuff. And yeah, there's a reason why a lot of kids and teenagers would love to do this job. And sometimes we grow away from it because being responsible and practical and all these other things and danger. And yeah, my family doesn't like it and all these things. But at the end of the day, we get to do some pretty amazing stuff where I like to remind myself and others sometimes when training sounds annoying, it's a impasse, it's a schedule difference. I got to drive all the way here and it's farther than my normal commute. But if you think about what a civilian has to pay to get world-class type, call it evac or, basically driving like a bat out of hell on a track or firearms training. And I mean, I'm not even talking about like the top tier, firearms programs, let's say in the Northwest, because we're both in the same region. There are, they're not all created the same, but let's just say your average police department, their range training, what it would take for a civilian to go to a class put on by a similar skilled and similar curriculum firearms trainer, man, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for a half day or a day of instruction.
Yeah, I mean, again, when we talk about what it is that we do as police officers and the things that we get exposure to and the things that we get to do, there's a lot of cool stuff in there. And I think that it's, when we're talking about new police officers, bringing them into that fold, bringing them into a culture in a positive manner, getting them the opportunity to go see those things is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into that. What are some of the things that really resonate with you as far as things that the role requires, right? We talked about some of that advocacy for the agency, some of that, being a positive mentor, but what else comes to mind for you?
I think well, we talked about being a champion for the agency and being a champion for the career. When sometimes we have to take a step back and remember, what was it like for us when we became a police officer? how excited were we? We spent all of this time praying that we would get that job. And you brought up, that sometimes we can get jaded, and how do we get around that? Always coming in and just, understand. I always try to have the same mindset of the coach that I had. Like, this is the coolest job ever, right? And so you have to have a champion for your agency. You have to have somebody who is competent in their job. And this starts getting into that thing where it's like, we're having new officers train new officers. And sometimes you can't get around that. You just have to deal with that. And we can talk about that. But you have to have somebody who is somewhat competent in the job, right? Because that FTO is going to be the person that recruit goes to when they have questions. And I've found that even beyond the field training process with these recruits, I'm often the guy that, they'll call and go, hey, I want to just run something by you. Now they're solo at that point. They're on their own, right? But you're still being that mentor. You're still being the person that is giving them direction, even though they're done with the field training process. So you have to have competent employees. I think you have to have somebody who has an interest in leadership, right? And that doesn't necessarily equate to this person wants to promote. I'll be honest with you. I have zero desire to ever be a sergeant, to ever promote beyond where I'm at right now. But that's not leadership, right? It's not just because the rank that I have on my sleeve denotes that I'm a leader in my agency.
It's management. Yeah,
exactly. You have leaders and you have bosses, and sometimes people are just bosses, and that's fine, right? But so you have to have an interest in leadership. You have to be willing to kind of foster those things and mentor those. I also think you have to have a heart for teaching. I think you have to just have that desire to go, I want to make, and we talked about that at the beginning, I want to make the next generation of cops as good as we can, and as good as the generation that came before us tried to do as well. And then I think the final kind of point to that, and this is a lot to unpack, man, you got to have patience. You have to be able to, because, I always think about those old Saturday Night Live skits where it's that IT thing, and somebody calls IT and they come down and they're like, I don't know how to do this. And the IT guy's like, just move. Let me get in there. I'll go do it. Right. You can't do that. That's not how we're going to learn. And so you just got to have, you got to understand that they don't know what you know. They don't know how to do that. And you have to be patient.
Yeah. And to work that back, you're right. These are big themes to unpack, but I love how you outline that. I would almost say that you need to have patience if you truly have a heart to teach. Right? It's not just teaching is one thing, lecturing is another. So you could be the professor up the front of the auditorium and just spouting off all this stuff and take notes and just pay attention, and I will move on with my day. It's not that. It's not just delivering information. It's teaching, right? Teaching effectively requires learning, and allowing an environment to learn requires patience. So I love that. I also like the conversation of, we started with attitude, right? Having a positive outlook on the job and the agency, with a practical means, but then also competence. And yeah, there is that conundrum that we're in as a really young industry. A lot of people retired early. I don't blame them for the last several years, but it did leave us with this, whether it's a brain drain or experiential drain across the country. And so it became more and more common to have these really junior FTOs and junior sergeants, even junior detectives. And I don't want to detract too much, but this really illustrates my point. But I had another police leader sharing this issue, and he's in a different state. And so don't try to figure out where this happened for those in my area. Different state altogether. He basically said that, his troops got this report of threats with a gun involving juvenile students. Fast forward, a detective makes contact with the kid. The kid said it's not a real gun. It's a BB gun. And they write up the case. They leave the kid. They don't pick up the BB gun. They don't get a warrant or consent, or, they don't attack it from any of those angles. Well, there's a school shooting. or an involved shooting. I don't know if it was at the school, but it happened thereafter. So it was a real gun, or at least the kid had access to a real gun. And this was like shown in social media or some sort of like video call, is how the victims came to relay that. Now, you could say that's inexperience, probably, right? That's probably a huge factor. And you could also say that's competence, but I think that where we want to bridge that and not disparage those with less time on is humility and giving them the environment to ask and seek that mentorship, right? So I would like to think that in a different type of culture, a really green detective knows that, I think I should lock this down. I think that we should keep the kid. This is a pretty big deal, but you know what? I'm not sure. And I'm going to ask my boss, and I'm going to ask of the chain. And similarly, like I've said this far before the podcast, but I would choose an FTO that was greener and had less time on, as long as they knew how to teach the person to be a basic new cop and seek the answers where they can find them, because that is most of it. Like, we don't know all the answers. We can't memorize all these codes and laws, and we have the internet. We have access to information. Most decisions that we have to make are not truly in the moment, and that's a different thing if we're talking about like in the moment, the here and now. What are your thoughts on that, Brian? As I kind of jumble some of these things together and bridge some of the different priorities that you've outlined.
Yeah, culture is huge, and culture is. I think culture is more than just, do we have fun at work? Do we get along with each other? It's defining the expectations of what constitutes a good investigation. How far do we as an agency take our investigations? In a perfect world, we should take them all the way, right? Now, sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes there's extenuating circumstances that make that more challenging to do. But when we're setting that culture of like, hey, listen, we're not just going to take a call like this and do the bare minimum and then wash our hands of it and go, nah, it's good. We did what we could do. No, we have an expectation of this agency, of our community, to take what we need to take in terms of investigation all the way. And that culture, that starts with an FTO. When a new officer starts at their agency, they can sit down in all of these kind of orientation type classes and be talked to about sergeants and command about what the expectations are. But at the end of the day, for us as officers, what's more important? Yes, we want to do a good job. We want to do a competent job. But how we're looked at by our peers is probably the thing that we lean on the most. And so as an FTO, when we talk about setting that culture, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, this is how we do things here. This is the expectation of not only our agency and your fellow workers, but our community as well. And so setting that right from the beginning, it makes it much more challenging for people to deviate from that. And when they do, then they don't like it. They don't feel like, it feels bad, right? Because from a cultural perspective, your peers are looking at you going, yeah, that's subpar, man. And that's not where we work. And when we're talking about, you brought up an interesting point, because, we are in this place now in law enforcement, and I think it's pretty typical kind of nationwide, where we have this newer generation of cops coming in, and we do have circumstances where we have younger police officers training even younger police officers. And so I think getting back to those kind of key points of who should be an FTO, it's even more important in situations like that, where they have to have a heart for teaching. They have to have that patience. And I've seen it too with newer FTOs. They're like, well, I went through this and now I'm doing this job. And we all know how, the bravado of younger cops can be, right? They're very gung-ho. They're very opinionated. They're young. And so sometimes we don't see that patience. It's like, this is how I'm doing it. Why aren't you doing it that way? And I think that just comes with time and experience and being in this job long enough to know that, like, yeah, not everybody is going to do it the right way. And I think that, at least not in the beginning, right? And we as FTOs, and I have this conversation with my recruits all the time, recruits tend to really freak out about the numbers, right? Especially if we're using like the San Jose model of training.
The scoring, yeah.
The scoring. And they look at those numbers, or if they get a 1 for the day or a 2 for the day, you can almost kind of see this deflation process that takes place in them. And that's a downside to the San Jose model of training. There are tons of upsides to it, and we can get into that as well. But one of those things is like, have that conversation with your recruit. Hey, I expect you to screw up. I expect you to make mistakes. If you weren't out here making mistakes and doing things the wrong way, why are you even in training? You're doing it the way you should be doing it. There's an expectation that you're going to mess up, and that's okay. And I will say that 3 dozen times during a 5-week phase with my recruit. You're going to mess up. I expect you to mess up. I'm okay with you messing up. I just want you to learn from it. And so I think that's where, getting back to those younger, newer FTOs training newer cops, I think it's important and advantageous to have a range of experience in your FTO cadre, right? Have a group of people that are veteran that are training the cops, because they do 2 things. They kind of bring that perspective of a veteran police officer to the conversation, but they also can be kind of that safety check with the newer coaches. And if you're really being a leader, then you should be able to have those conversations with your newer FTOs, like, hey, that's probably not the best approach to it. And if you've chosen your FTOs right, they're going to be receptive to that.
Yeah. You outlined a lot of really powerful things, and it is that variety, right? And you kind of brought it up in the beginning, which is that you are a culmination of all the experiences that were shown to you, modeled for you, taught to you, different coaches, right? Whether it's actual field trainers, probably supervisors, and just other peer officers that you worked alongside, right? When you're cutting your teeth, you're not even in training anymore. You're still always in training because you're learning so much from the 5-10 year officer that you work a district with. And so that's for better and that's for worse. And you also did a really good job detailing culture being the, not what we say we do, but what we actually do and how we do it. And the how, we could really go down rabbit holes to the point you just made, which is, the accountability piece. And do we say it's okay to make mistakes, or do we actually demonstrate that? Do you have FTOs and senior officers that bring up their mistakes and they actually share them with the newer folks? So we've now proven it, right? Do we have bosses saying, yeah, I can't believe what I jacked up when I was new, and I can't believe what I jacked up last week, but maybe I'll wait a little bit of time before I share that. Like, then you're actually showing that there is this culture of self-development, of learning from mistakes, not hiding them, because that's terrible. That's how we get into bigger issues if we're not bringing it up. So I think this might be a good time to bring up the communication, right? You talked about the FTO cadre, it might be called, or the group of trainers. Most people, especially with that San Jose model, they cycle through different trainers. So they start adding to their tool belt and their Swiss Army knife of police skills and tactics and personalities. And they keep building this. But let's talk about the critical piece of communication. Like, how is this student officer doing? What are some of your reflections from the time in that role, and how you can make sure that you're not getting slippage of what a recruit or a student officer is getting and needs to work on? Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. For a thorough conversation on how Tire Tag can help your agency in revenue collection, visit episode 204. That's 204.
Communication is probably the biggest factor there, probably the biggest key to it, because I can go look at reports, I can go read through DORs and get a general idea of what's happening, but it's the same way that I would say reading a text communication is going to be much different than having a conversation. I always go back to that Key and Peele episode where they're sending text to each other and they're both going like, hey, it's really nice. And the other one's like, I can't believe this guy, right? Because it's text.
Yeah.
And so while you get the concepts of what's happening, what you lose sometimes, I think, is voice inflection, how FTOs are feeling about those things. What are their perceptions of those things, right? Because we're writing a document, a DOR. It's got to be professional, but there are nuances to the things that are happening. And so if I have a recruit that's coming to me a week from now, if I don't have a method of communicating with that current FTO, just to even get their vibe on the recruit, like where are they at? What are the things that they're struggling with? If I don't have that, then I don't want to say that I'm going in blind to it, because I'm not. I can read through the DORs, but I'm not getting the nuanced things that are happening with this recruit. And sometimes those are the most important things. You know, it's clear that the recruit messed up here, right? But how did they react to that? How did they respond to that? Were they receptive to that? Did they kind of blow it off? And I've had recruits that have done both.
Yeah, for sure.
And so having the ability just to kind of talk with your peer FTOs and get a good understanding of where that recruit is at. That's why it's important to have those FTO meetings. And we do that pretty good at my agency, where we're advancing one recruit from one phase to the next. We will sit down with the training sergeant. We will sit down with their current and upcoming FTOs, talk about some of the things that are happening, brainstorm some ideas. Here's the reality. Yeah, I've been an FTO for 16 years. I've been a cop for 19 years. Do I still make mistakes? Man, I made one last night. All right. I took somebody into custody when I shouldn't have. Not that I shouldn't have. It was, based on some information that I thought was right. It wasn't right. Once I realized it was wrong, took him out of custody. It doesn't do, like, I learn from it. That's fine. I make a mistake. It's all good. I own it. No big deal. Right. But my job as an FTO, my job as a mentor to these younger cops should be more than that. And you brought up that excellent point where it's like, we should be able to go, hey, even a 19-year cop still makes mistakes from time to time. When I own that, when I talk to the recruits about, I had three newer officers that are on my shift ask me, hey, what happened on that? If I wanted to save face, not a big deal, right? But that's not who I am by nature. It doesn't do them any good. I'm demonstrating for them that A, we're still going to make mistakes. Here I did 19 years later. And B, it's okay to own that mistake, and talk about it. Let's learn from that. And so, being able to communicate, I think, amongst your peers as FTOs, amongst new officers that are done with their field training, and being able to communicate and articulate with your recruits while you have them, all of those kind of meld together in your just ability to have a conversation and communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering if this is a good time to talk about TrackWire. Tell us what it is in the scheme of FTO challenges and solutions.
Yeah, it's, I started this company back in 2019, and it really was just an observation that we made at our agency and the method that we were using to document recruit performance. It was, we use the San Jose model of training. The San Jose model of training has been around since the mid 70s. It's a tried and true method of training new police officers. It's got its shortcomings, and that's fine. But, up until 10 years ago, we've just kind of been doing the same thing. We're just documenting recruit performance. We're giving them scores. It gets thrown into a file or a notebook or a shared drive somewhere, and then just kind of goes into the abyss of documentation. And I always thought there had to be a better way to do those things. And so when we started developing TrackWire and building TrackWire, I make no mistakes about it. I am not a software engineer. I'm just a cop. But I know people that are.
Just a cop. We need to abandon that phrase. But
you're you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
But my point,
you saw a need in a solution.
Yeah, and my point is, I didn't have the chops to do those things. But I found people that did, right? And I partnered with people who did. And so when we talked about it, I wanted it to be more than just a place where we're just documenting, because then it just becomes a glorified file storage system. And we can do so much more with that. And so we've focused on over the last 5 years really of how do we use the information that we're putting into the system to really help us train new police officers. We can't just take the approach of document it and forget it. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, we start building tools, we start building functionality that allows us to take that performance from a recruit and spit out information in ways that allow us to be able to fine tune our approach. When you started as a police officer, when I started as a police officer, you and I, we excelled in different ways. We struggled in different ways. And I think that is the approach of we're just going to train police officers the same way across the board. We're losing an advantage that we have if we know where this recruit is at. And so taking the data that we're putting into the system and being able to identify, hey, this is a specific area where this recruit is struggling, or this is a specific area of knowledge comprehension that this recruit is struggling with. For me as an FTO, that is fantastic information to have because it really allows me to hyper-focus my attention into those specific areas. One of the things that our system does is it allows you to test your recruit's knowledge in key areas, knowledge of criminal code, knowledge of criminal procedure, traffic law, department policy, things like that. And so I've had times where when I'm looking at that data from that recruit, I can see that this person's confidence in knowledge of traffic law is really high. This person's confidence in knowledge of department policy is really high. But this person's knowledge in criminal code is less than where we want it to be. And so now I don't have to take that approach of I'm going to train them on everything. I know exactly where I need to be surgical, right? And go in there and go, we're going to spend more of our time talking about criminal law. I'm going to spend more of my time, going, hey, here's, what are the elements of assault? Here's the situation you have. What potential crimes do you have? I'm going to test my recruit more on that. My goal is to bring that recruit up to a place that not only they need to be in order to be competent in their job, but also to a place where we expect them to be as police officers within our organization. And so we're always looking at ways to kind of change that and add to that. And we have, we've built a system that gives us a ton of capabilities in order to really identify where your recruits are struggling on an individual recruit basis so that you can hyper-focus your attention into those areas for that recruit.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think from my my small chunk of time as a field training officer years ago, but then also wearing the hat of training sergeant and field training coordinator, man, when you're getting all these reports, whether they're paper or whether they're digital, to sift through them and basically read all these notes that, with that model, the daily observational report or the DOR, like you're kind of looking at all these capacities that might be segregated through this whole document, and then you're reading about a call, and you might read about details of that call, and you may or may not know if it's the same call, and so you're trying to kind of manually digest all this information and then get to like a summary of what this person needs to do. But you also pointed out earlier where so much is lost in context when it's just text on a document or a piece of paper. Oftentimes, and I would suggest and I would approve overtime for people to do it if their shifts were all, all cattywampus and totally different. But I'm like, hey, can you get with this other field trainer or even on the phone? Like 10, 15 minutes will go a long way and you'll be able to hit the ground running. Because to kind of what I'm thinking about when you're describing that last piece is you can't just, you don't want to just ask the recruit all these things because they might be totally great in one thing and you need to spend your time like efficiently. But you also run into a lot of issues if you ask the recruit what they need, because every variety of recruits. Some are very high EQ and introspective, and maybe they're leaning into the challenge, saying, "Hey, but like I I struggle with this. I need more opportunities to make quick decisions. In progress incidents." But usually, it's a lot of self-preservation and trying to survive. So whether they're intentionally not telling you that, or whether they are just not that aware because they don't know what they don't know, versus being able to key in on these very clear things so you can develop some strategies around it with your limited time, because this is a big deal. I mean, it can be life or death. It can be constitutional rights and violations there. It can be giant liability. It can and is all those things.
I think you nailed it. We like to think that we hire people with a high level of emotional intelligence, right? That can be introspective and look at themselves and go, yeah, I need struggles with this. But the thing that's always competing with that, with new police officers, is I don't want to mess up because I don't want to lose my job. And we talked about that earlier, where it's like, it's okay for you to make mistakes. We expect you to make mistakes. You have to give them permission to do that, because once you do that, once you set that free, it opens them up a little bit more to go, okay, just because I made a mistake here doesn't mean that I'm going to lose my job, doesn't mean that I'm going to get fired. Now I can be a little bit more reflective on my own process and be honest about the things that I need. Ultimately, that's our goal, right? To set our recruits up for success, to have a long career, to sprint across that finish line by the time that they retire. And so, those two competing interests with new recruits, if we can look at the progress of that recruit from, I almost want to say, an objective standard, right?
Yeah.
Because it's now it's taking away what they're telling me in terms of, I need this. I don't know how many times I've ever had a recruit going, hey, how are things going? Oh, things are going great. And I'll give you a good example of this. I had a recruit that was struggling immensely, was just kind of shutting down, would make a mistake. And when we had a conversation about that mistake, that would almost be the end of their day. You couldn't get anything across to them again. You couldn't train them anymore. And a couple of times where it's like, hey, listen, I'm going to unplug you for the day, right? You're just going to, you're highly stressed out right now. That's not good for you. That's not good for me. That's not good for any potential dangerous situations that we find ourselves in. And so you're going to ride passenger for the rest of the day. Just relax. All is good. And when I had that conversation with my training sergeant about, hey, these are the things that I'm seeing, and ultimately that conversation is had with the chief of police, and the chief calls that recruit in and goes, hey, how are things going? And the message that's being relayed to the chief and to my training sergeant is, everything's going great. I'm learning a bunch. I'm really enjoying it. And the reality of that's not reality. That's not what was going on. And as soon as that conversation is done, my sergeant's like, yeah, the chief sat down with him. He says he's doing really good. Not 5 minutes later, that recruit comes into me and says, hey, I'm really stressed out in this. Is it okay if I work 3 days instead of 4 days a week? And it's just like, so we can be saying one thing, right? They can be saying one thing. They could be operating in that self-preservation mode where, to the people that make decisions, everything is hunky-dory. Everything is great. When we see the numbers, when we see the data and the analytics reflect that that's not truly the story, and we have some competing things that are happening, it now gives your agency, you as FTOs, training command, it gives you the ability really to just go, it's not jiving. Those things, they don't match, right? And so, just being able to see that and dissect those things can be huge for an agency, can be huge for FTOs.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I mean, we talked about culture, and when we're talking about the job, we're talking about like getting stuff done. We're talking about operations. We don't just talk about culture and wellness just because it's fun. No, we're talking about things that are going to help operations. And so with all that and the examples you gave, talking about how to look at FTO as a program, as a role, but also like a tool like TrackWire, for me, it's like communication, collaboration, consistency, right? These are all the things that make you gel, and so that all your efforts are not in vain. You're not spinning your wheels one way over here, and then an FTO goes and and is working and doing the best they can, but not having like the full background, and then working with the recruit in a different direction. And then sometimes that's like talking to parent A, right, to make it more about parenting again, right? Like parent A says this, well, parent B says that, but they didn't have the same information. And so sometimes the kid is manipulating, and sometimes the kid's not, because the kid doesn't know. And so if we're not providing the framework for consistency, then yeah, nobody wins. So man, I love that. I would love to see if you have any kind of closing thoughts on TrackWire, and then also kind of ask you a little bit more informally some things about FTO and student officers, maybe clearly without names, but just thoughts on some students that excelled and didn't excel, because we do have a lot of listenership that's newer, and they might be listening into this because they want to know what to expect, and what things to avoid and what things to lean toward.
Yeah, I think, just on the TrackWire front and what we've built and what we're building, we're a company that's built by cops. We are still in this career. We understand what we as cops need. We're not software engineers that decided we were going to make law enforcement software. We're cops who went out and found people who can build software for law enforcement. So I think it's just a perspective of, what is our approach to building tools and what is our approach to building a company. And I would love to continue conversations about FTEP. It's something that I'm extremely passionate, clearly passionate about. Done it for 15 years.
Yeah. Well, why don't we make this kind of a quick fiery thing? I'm just gonna ask for, let's say, max of a few words per response, and we'll just go
Perfect.
from there.
Love it.
All right. So, biggest pet peeve of an FTO.
Biggest pet
qualities
peeve
that an FTO, maybe not a great FTO, would have.
Yeah. It's always going to come back to patience with me. You just have to have patience in training new police officers. They don't know what they don't know, and it's our job to make sure that they learn in an effective manner.
Yeah. Okay. Biggest pet peeves in a student officer.
Great question, and I thought about this for quite some time, and I would say, I'll often ask, why did you do or not do what you did? The thing that I hate to hear the most is, I don't know. Right? We are in a job where we have to be able to articulate and justify the things that we do, whether it's arresting somebody or use of force. We better be able to go, I did what I did because of X, Y, and Z. And so I want to train that into the recruits. Be thoughtful in your approach to the things that you're doing. Be able to articulate what it is that you're doing, because that's going to happen the rest of your career. You're going to be sitting on a stand and go, well, why did you do that, officer? You better be able to answer that question.
Yeah. Not a lightning round response, but I love the response because it really gives people a lot to think about. I think it gives every person in the role or their tenure something to think about. Decision making, knowing why you do the things you do, articulation, judgment, like this all comes to play. I will also extend, and we'll put a pause on lightning round because actually off of a recommendation of another local cop, but it was a Gary Klein, Sources of Power, and it's basically about decision making, and they analyzed all these critical decision makers, from pilots, military, firefighters, because medical, but firefighters, they document a lot and they go do so many things and they approach things in this systematic way, whereas cops, like, no two things are the same. So it's kind of a drawback at times, but it's also credit to how adaptive we have to be. But it's really just one of the biggest things is, like, when experienced people make a decision, sometimes they don't know why in the moment, but usually it draws upon all this basically these archives of all these experiences they've seen. This is a unique problem, but they start doing a decision this way, they start acting that way because enough similarities and pattern recognition about things they've seen before in their own time, or maybe from reviewing other incidents, right? We review body cam, and that's an excellent tool. So it's all to say that usually afterwards they can piecemeal, especially if they're talking through it. So that's the value of an after action or a debrief, is they can get to what it is. So that's my little kind of sidestep to say, hey, regardless of whether you're brand new or whether you've got 25 years in, whether you're learning a new role or you finally got into the specialty unit you want, there's usually a reason why, but you can continue to extend that archive, that encyclopedia of information by literally just being curious, a humble, active learner. So I just wanted to share that real quick because I think that there's a lot of value there.
You're exactly right. And, we say this phrase, it kind of gets thrown around a lot. And I think because of that, it loses some of its meaning. But there is a reason the phrase training and experience is so important in what we do. Because to your point, we can have an issue, we can face a situation, make a decision, and we know kind of in the back of our mind, I've been here before. I'm applying my experience to it. We may not be able to clearly articulate it at that moment, but we're, again, leaning on that training that we've had in our career, leaning on that experience that we've had in our career to be able to go, I've been here before. This is what I saw. This is why I did what I did.
What do you think is one of the most important character traits for a student officer to be successful?
I think it just boils down to, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, having the ability to be, having the ability to use emotional intelligence, to be introspective, and just be an adult about the fact that you're going to screw up, and that's totally okay. You're here to learn, and everybody knows that. And so I think, again, we always say that, you're harder on yourself than anybody else ever is. And I think there's some truth to that. When FTOs or when recruits are in a situation where they're being constantly evaluated and their job is on the line in their mind and all of these kind of things, I think just like take a breath. It's all good. You're learning, learn from it, move on.
Yeah, that's solid. What do I want to ask you? I feel like this is going to be the last one. It's got to be good. What is your favorite type of incident to train a new officer on?
Favorite type of incident to train a new officer on? I think I don't know if I would necessarily say it's a specific call type. I think my favorite type of incidents to train new officers on are ones that they've never experienced before. We look at the data that recruits are getting, call types that recruits are getting exposure to, and I can see in our system that, they've been to 15 domestic disturbance calls. They probably have learned quite a bit how to do that, but how are they going to respond in a nasty death investigation, right? And so I think it's those moments that you really get to put on your teaching hat and walk them through a situation where they've never seen this before. They've never experienced it. We see things that the general public don't see. And so they don't have that exposure to it coming into it. And so to be able to see how they're going to react and respond and teach them and walk them through that, I think is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. Would you say that you prefer early phase, like phase one?
I've kind of wavered back and forth on this question. And I think I don't necessarily know if I have a preference in any phase. I think each one of those phases have their merits and the exciting parts of being an FTO. Later phases, you're getting to see kind of almost a finished product in terms of FTEP, and you're really just kind of honing that and fine-tuning the things, getting them ready for life as a solo police officer. Early phase stuff, it's the wonder, I guess, if you will, the discovery of what this job is and being able to walk recruits through those types of things. So I don't necessarily say I would have a preference on either. I enjoy both, but for different reasons.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, I'll just say it, my least favorite role was the block 3, where the student acted like they had never seen this thing before, but surely they have, because I read the DORs.
Right.
Do you agree that's the hardest time?
That is. And, I think you can almost, again, getting back to the parenting metaphor, I think you can almost kind of equate that to their teenage years, right? Where you're like, hey, I got this. And like, well, but do you? I mean, do you really? You probably don't. But they're stepping into the world and they want to show that bravado and that I can handle this job and do this job. And so Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would call that my least favorite. I don't even know if I really have a least favorite,
Yeah, I
honestly. But
appreciate the confidence. What I was getting at is more like maybe you're the axe person and it's like a make or break and they are absolutely on the struggle bus and they're not even in the driver's seat of the struggle bus. They're doing something else in the back of the bus. You're like, what are you doing?
yeah, I had a stretch of recruits. I had 4 recruits in a row that got let go during my phase.
Mm.
And at the same time, we had a new group of recruits coming in, and I had a reputation amongst those new recruits of being the axe man, right? Or the hammer.
It's pattern recognition on their part. Yeah.
It's exactly right. But it had nothing to do with me. It just, it had to do with the fact that I had 4 recruits that really were struggling in their process. And so, yeah, I mean, to your point, yeah, I would agree in that circumstance, and not just necessarily those mid phases in and of themselves, but when you have those mid phases where you have somebody that is really struggling, the frustration that I find is, we've talked about this. I've shown you how to do it the right way. It's not clicking. How can I make that click? What else can I do to make this resonate with you? And that goes back to, I think, having that group of FTOs all with the same kind of mindset that I can come to them and go, hey, listen, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this. What else can I do? And as the senior FTO in my agency, I still need to be able to be humble enough to go, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. And so being able to rely on those groups, new and young and old, and the younger FTOs bring a completely different perspective than I do. And so I got to be humble enough to be able to do that. And so, and get that feedback. So yeah, in those very unique niche situations where we're mid-phase and somebody is really on the struggle bus, that's a challenging time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brian, man, we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of food for thought for field trainers, for students, for administrators, and everyone involved with the development of your new officers. You talked about TrackWire. Please tell folks where people can learn more, find out more about TrackWire.
Yeah, trackwire.com, TARC wire.com. That's where we're at. We're on social, LinkedIn, a little bit on X, but mostly our website is where you're going to find information. And, I alluded to it a little bit earlier. We're developing some really cool tools and some new softwares that are going to be coming out, really a system to manage an entire agency. And so we're super excited about what's coming and continuing to build the tools that we need to be successful in training the next generation of cops.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for sharing about it.
Appreciate the time. It's been a pleasure, and I love it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.